The first time my wife told me she wanted the house, she said it like she was asking for something she had already paid for. We were sitting across from each other in a conference room at my attorney's office, with a stack of financial disclosures between us and two lawyers pretending not to notice that my wife had stopped looking at me weeks ago. She had a folder in front of her, one hand resting on it, the other wrapped around a paper cup of coffee she hadn't touched. "I want the house," she said. Not, "I think I should keep the house." Not, "Can we discuss what happens to the house?" Just, "I want the house." I remember looking at her for a few seconds because after 11 years of marriage, I had become very good at recognizing the difference between a request and a decision. This was a decision. My attorney, Daniel, glanced at me. My wife's attorney leaned back. My wife looked directly at me for the first time that morning. I said, "Okay." Daniel's eyebrows moved about half an inch. My wife blinked. Her attorney actually shifted in his chair. "Okay," my wife repeated. "Yes, you agree? I agree." Nobody spoke for several seconds. It was the first genuinely quiet moment we'd had in months. Daniel cleared his throat. "Before we move on," he said, "I want to make sure we're all understanding the same thing." My wife smiled. "I'm sure we are." Daniel looked at me. "You're comfortable with her retaining the marital residence?" "Yes." "Without selling it?" "Yes." "Without a buyout from her?" "Yes." My wife stared at me. "You don't want the house?" I looked at her. "I don't." "The house?" I looked at her. "I don't." That was true. I didn't want the house. I wanted out. But there was another reason. A reason I had not told my wife. A reason I had barely explained to Daniel. And if I had explained it to my family, they probably would have thought I'd lost my mind. The truth was simple. I knew something she didn't, and for the first time since our marriage began falling apart, I was not interested in convincing her of anything. I was tired of explaining. I was tired of defending myself. I was tired of being told that every boundary I set was evidence that I didn't care. So I let her have the house. Then she asked for the car, and I gave her that too. Then most of the furniture. Then the expensive appliances. Then the bedroom set she had picked out. Then the dining table my parents had given us. Then the television in the basement. Every time I said yes. By the end of that afternoon, my wife believed she had defeated me. She didn't know that I had been waiting for her to make exactly those choices. To understand why, you have to understand how we got there. My name is Mark. I'm 36 years old. At least that's how old I was when the divorce started. I work in commercial insurance, mostly helping mid-sized businesses manage property and liability coverage. It's not glamorous work. I don't drive a company car or wear a custom suit. Most of my days involve spreadsheets, renewal meetings, risk assessments, and clients who think every premium increase is personally directed at them. But I'm good at numbers. I'm especially good at reading contracts. That mattered more than I realized when I met my wife. Her name is Rachel. We met at a friend's 4th of July barbecue when I was 25 and she was 24. She had dark hair, a quick smile, and the kind of confidence that made people turn toward her when she entered a room. I was immediately interested. She was ambitious. At least, that's what I called it back then. Looking back, I think she was less interested in building something than she was in never being the person who had less. Her parents had divorced when she was young. She talked about money constantly. Not because she was greedy in an obvious way, she was obsessed with security. The problem was that her definition of security kept getting bigger. First, it was having a decent apartment. Then, it was owning a house. Then, it was having a newer car. Then, a nicer kitchen. Then, traveling twice a year. Then, investing. Then, having a house that made other people think you were successful. Every milestone became the floor for the next one. When we got married, I thought that was normal. We both worked. We saved. We bought a starter home. We eventually sold it and bought the house she wanted. I thought we were building a life. She thought we were upgrading one. Those two things can look identical for a long time, until they don't. The first real crack appeared after I received a promotion. I was 31. My income jumped significantly. Rachel celebrated for about 3 days. Then she started making plans. "I think we should move," she said one night. "We just bought this house." "Exactly. What does that mean?" "It means we've outgrown it." I laughed. She didn't. "Mark, we're not going to stay in the same place forever. We've been here 18 months. That's long enough to know what I don't like. I asked what she didn't like. She listed the kitchen, the school district, the backyard, the commute, the neighbors, the fact that the master bedroom wasn't on the opposite side of the house. She wanted a bigger place. I told her we could afford one, but I also told her we didn't need one. That distinction started more arguments than I can count. Over the next few years, our conversations about money changed. She began treating my income as something that belonged to both of us, while treating her income as something that belonged primarily to her. At first, I didn't notice. Then I noticed everything. She opened a separate savings account. She stopped contributing the percentage of household expenses we had agreed upon. She bought things without discussing them. When I asked about it, she accused me of controlling her, so I stopped asking. That was probably my first mistake, not because I should have controlled her spending. I shouldn't have. But because silence doesn't solve financial problems, it just allows them to grow. By the time I realized how much debt she had accumulated, we were already emotionally separated, even though we still lived under the same roof. There were credit cards I didn't know about, personal loans, a store financing account, a balance on a luxury SUV she had insisted she needed. She always had an explanation. I'll pay it down. It's temporary. I got a bonus coming. I'll handle it. And I believed her, until I stopped believing her. The final year of our marriage was strange. We could go 3 days without having a real conversation. Then we'd have a screaming argument over something ridiculous, like whose turn it was to buy groceries. I started sleeping in the basement. She told people I had abandoned her emotionally. I told people we were having problems. Neither version was completely true. The truth was uglier. We had become strangers who knew too much about each other. Then I discovered the affair. I didn't catch her in bed. There was no dramatic confrontation, no lipstick on a collar, no stranger answering the phone. I found an email. That's all. One email. A reservation confirmation from a hotel in Cincinnati. Her name. His name. 2 nights. A date when she had told me she was visiting her sister. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I searched the man's name. He worked with her. His name was Evan. He was married too. I confronted her that evening. She denied it. Then she admitted they had been emotionally close. Then she admitted they had slept together. Then she told me it wasn't the reason our marriage was failing. That sentence bothered me more than the affair, because she said it like she was correcting me. I asked how long. She said 6 months. 6 months. I sat on the edge of our bed and realized that for half a year, every time she had kissed me goodbye before leaving for work, she had already decided that I was the person who deserved to be lied to. That was the moment something inside me went quiet. I didn't scream. I didn't hit anything. I didn't threaten Evan. I didn't threaten her. I just said, I want a divorce. She cried. Not because she didn't want the divorce, because I said it before she could. Within 3 weeks, she hired a lawyer. Within 6 weeks, she had a completely different version of our marriage ready for anyone who would listen. According to Rachel, I had been emotionally absent. I had worked too much. I had been obsessed with money. I had failed to support her dreams. I had become controlling. The affair was complicated. She wasn't proud of it, but she had been unhappy. Her friends believed her. Some of mine did too. My sister didn't. My sister Emily told me something I still remember. Stop trying to get people to agree with you. What? You're acting like if everyone understands what happened, you'll feel better. I want the truth out there. No, Emily said. You want justice. I didn't answer. She was right. But I didn't know what justice looked like yet. Then the divorce negotiations started. Rachel wanted the house. I expected that. What I didn't expect was how aggressively she wanted it. The house had appreciated significantly. On paper, it had enough equity to make both of us very comfortable. The problem was that paper didn't tell the whole story. When the first settlement proposal arrived, Rachel wanted the house, the SUV, almost all of our liquid savings, and a significant portion of our household property. She also wanted me to pay part of the remaining marital debt. Daniel read the proposal twice. Then he looked at me. She's asking for a lot. I know. We can contest several of these points. I know. You don't have to agree. I know. He leaned back. Mark, I'm going to ask you something directly. Okay. Are you trying to punish yourself? I laughed. No, because this looks like you're willing to give away everything just to end the marriage. Maybe I am. That's not the same thing as making a good decision. I looked through the window of his office. Cars moved along the street outside. People were going to work. People were buying groceries. People were having normal days. I wanted one of those days. Not revenge, not victory, just normal. But there was another thing I knew. The house wasn't worth what Rachel thought it was worth. Not to her. Not after the divorce. And I knew that because of something that had happened 2 years earlier. The first time I saw the document, I had almost forgotten about it. We were refinancing the mortgage. Rachel had been complaining about the interest rate. I handled most of the paperwork because I understood financial documents better than she did. During that process, our lender required updated property records. That's when I noticed a restriction attached to the subdivision. It wasn't unusual. It wasn't some secret loophole. It was a recorded agreement affecting several properties in our development. Our neighborhood had been built in phases by a developer that had retained certain rights and obligations connected to stormwater management and common infrastructure. Most homeowners never cared. The association handled the visible parts. But there was another issue. The developer had created a special assessment structure for a major drainage and retention project that had been postponed. The assessment hadn't been triggered yet. At the time, the project was considered unlikely. Then, 18 months before our divorce, the county changed its stormwater requirements. The subdivision had a problem, a serious one. The retention system serving several streets no longer met the updated standards. The homeowners association had been negotiating with the county. I knew because I was one of the people involved. Not as a board member. As a volunteer, I had helped the HOA review insurance implications after a major storm caused flooding in a neighboring section. That's how I learned the numbers. The projected infrastructure project was expensive, very expensive, and the responsibility wasn't solely the HOA's. A special assessment was being discussed. At first, the estimated amount per household was around $18,000, then $24,000. Then, after engineering studies, the estimate moved above $30,000. There were still variables. No one knew the final amount, but I knew something Rachel didn't. The property value everyone was using in the divorce negotiations assumed the neighborhood's current condition. It did not account for the assessment. It also did not account for another issue. The house itself had a drainage easement along the rear section of the property. That easement didn't prevent normal use, but it affected future construction. The deck we'd always talked about expanding, not happening. The detached garage Rachel had dreamed about, probably not. The finished basement, still legal as it was, but there was a risk that future waterproofing or grading work would become complicated. None of this made the house worthless. That would be ridiculous. The house was still a good house, but Rachel wasn't fighting for a good house. She was fighting for an asset she believed was worth a certain number, and she had built her entire divorce strategy around that number. I knew the likely assessment. I knew the restrictions. I knew the HOA's financial position, and I knew Rachel had almost no cash reserves. She had debt. She had a car payment. She had revolving credit. She needed the house to be liquid enough in her mind to represent financial security, but the house wasn't liquid. It was an obligation. The assessment wouldn't disappear because she owned the property. The mortgage wouldn't disappear. The taxes wouldn't disappear. The maintenance wouldn't disappear. And I knew she had no idea how much it would cost to maintain that house alone. That was the secret. Not a trick, not a loophole, not some magical clause, just information. Information I had gathered legitimately. Information I had gathered legitimately. Information I had tried to discuss with her before the divorce. And information she had dismissed. I had actually warned her once. It happened at our kitchen table. The HOA might have a special assessment. She looked up from her phone. For what? The drainage system. How much? They're still estimating. Then it's not real. It's real. It's not approved. That doesn't mean it won't happen. She rolled her eyes. Mark, you worry about everything. I didn't argue. She went back to her phone. That conversation lasted less than 2 minutes. Now, during the divorce, she was demanding the house, so I let her. There was one more reason. Rachel had recently changed jobs. Her new position paid well on paper, but her compensation included a large variable component. She needed the house because she believed it would help her look financially stable. She also believed she could refinance. That mattered, because the divorce settlement would require her to refinance the mortgage into her name, and refinancing meant a new lender would examine her finances independently. She had no idea how difficult that would be. I did. Daniel knew too. That's why he looked at me when I agreed. He knew what I knew, but I had one rule. I wasn't going to sabotage her. I wasn't going to hide anything. I wasn't going to manipulate a lender. I wasn't going to interfere with the HOA. I wasn't going to call her employer. I wasn't going to tell anyone about her debt. I wasn't going to make anonymous complaints. If she wanted the house, she could have it. If she could qualify for it, maintain it, and handle the responsibilities attached to it, fine. If she couldn't, that wasn't my revenge. That was reality. Daniel eventually understood. "You've thought this through," he said. "Yes. And you're certain you don't want the property?" "No." "Why?" I looked at him. "Because I don't want to spend the next 5 years paying for something I don't want." He nodded slowly. "That's a much better answer." It was also incomplete, because there was something else I wanted. I wanted Rachel to understand that she had confused ownership with victory. The divorce hearing came 3 months later. By then, she had already told several friends that I was being unreasonable, that I was dragging things out, that she deserved the house because she had put more into the home emotionally. I didn't respond. At the final settlement meeting, she asked for the house again. I said yes. She asked for the SUV. I said yes. She asked for the living room furniture. I said yes. She asked for the living room furniture. I said yes. She asked for the bedroom furniture. I said yes. She wanted the dining set. Yes. The television. Yes. The patio furniture. Yes. The expensive espresso machine. Yes. My grandfather's old writing desk was one of the few things I refused. She didn't care. That surprised me. She actually laughed. "Keep your desk." I said, "Thank you." She thought she was being generous. She wasn't. The desk had sentimental value. The rest was just stuff. When the lawyers finished, Rachel looked relieved. She had won. I could see it. It wasn't subtle. She leaned toward her attorney and whispered something. He smiled. Then she looked at me. "You really didn't fight for anything?" I said no. "Why?" I could have told her. I could have said, "Because the house isn't the prize you think it is." I could have said, "Because you're about to inherit an obligation you don't understand." I could have said, "Because I already know the numbers." Instead, I said, "I think this is better for both of us." She smiled. Finally. That word stayed with me. Finally. As if she had been waiting for me to become the person she wanted me to be, the settlement was finalized. I moved into a one-bedroom apartment on the north side of town. It was small, embarrassingly small at first. My couch barely fit. I had to eat at a folding table. My bedroom had one window facing a parking lot. For the first few nights, I slept badly. The silence felt enormous. At the house, there had always been noises. The HVAC, the refrigerator, Rachel moving around upstairs, the dishwasher, the neighbors, the occasional dog barking. In the apartment, I heard the refrigerator cycle on and off. That was it. I thought about calling Rachel several times, not because I wanted her back, because I wanted to know if she was okay. I didn't. Instead, I started walking every morning. Then I started running. I joined a gym. I stopped drinking during the week. I started cooking. I began seeing friends again. And slowly, something happened that I hadn't expected. I became happier, not instantly, not dramatically. It happened in small pieces. I realized I could make dinner without asking anyone what they wanted. I could watch a movie without negotiating. I could spend Saturday morning doing nothing. I could leave a book on the coffee table. I could go to bed early. I could wake up late. I could make plans without checking another person's calendar. It felt selfish at first. Then it felt normal. Meanwhile, Rachel moved back into the house. She posted pictures, new furniture, fresh paint, a bottle of champagne on the kitchen island. One caption said, "New chapter." Another said, "Sometimes you have to choose yourself." A mutual friend showed me. I didn't ask to see it. She sent it anyway. I looked at the pictures. Rachel looked happy. I hoped she was. I genuinely did. But then I noticed something. The photographs were all taken inside the house. None showed the basement. None showed the backyard. None showed the drainage area. None showed the Acura notice board. I smiled, not because I wanted her to suffer, because I knew the clock had started. The first month passed. Nothing happened. The second month passed. Still nothing. Then Rachel called me. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I almost didn't answer. Hello? Mark. Her voice sounded different, not angry, confused. What's up? Did you know about the HOA assessment? I closed my eyes. There it was. I knew they were discussing one. Discussing? Yes. How much? They hadn't finalized it when we settled. She was quiet. Did you know it could be over 30,000? Yes. Silence. Why didn't you tell me? I leaned back in my chair. I did. No, you didn't. I told you about the drainage project. You said there might be something. That's what an assessment discussion means. Mark, Rachel, you're telling me you knew? I knew there was a potential assessment, and you still let me take the house? You wanted the house? Her breathing changed. That's unbelievable. I almost laughed. Why? You knew this. I knew there was a potential expense. So did the HOA. You should have told me. I did. No, you didn't. I didn't argue because I knew what would happen next. She would remember, eventually. She always remembered things differently when they became inconvenient. What happens now? She asked. Talk to the HOA. I did. And they said the assessment isn't final. Then wait. I don't have $30,000. I understand. Do you? Yes. She hung up. I stared at the phone. Then I put it down. I didn't celebrate. I didn't tell Emily. I didn't call Daniel. I didn't send Rachel a message saying I told you so. I went back to work. 3 weeks later, Daniel called me. Rachel's attorney reached out. I smiled faintly. What does he want? Apparently, she's concerned about the property's financial obligations. That's unfortunate. You don't sound surprised. I'm not. He paused. Mark, I want to make something clear. Okay, you did everything properly. I know. And you didn't conceal anything in the settlement disclosures. I know. And the assessment wasn't finalized. I know. And the assessment wasn't finalized. I know. I just want that on record. Daniel, are you worried? About you? No. About her? He sighed. I'm her lawyer's problem. That was the first time I left. But the real consequences hadn't even started, because the assessment was only one part of the problem. The bigger issue was the mortgage. Rachel had assumed refinancing would be simple. It wasn't. She had taken the house with a loan balance that was still significant. Her income was different from mine. Her debt-to-income ratio was worse. And once she applied for refinancing, the lender looked at everything. The car loan, the credit cards, the personal loans, the variable income, the divorce obligations. The lender didn't care that she had won the house. The lender cared whether she could afford it. 2 months after the divorce, her refinance application was denied. She called me again. This time she was furious. You knew this would happen. No. You're lying. I'm not. You knew I wouldn't qualify. I knew your debt situation. Because you controlled everything. I never controlled your accounts. You knew. Rachel, knowing something isn't controlling it. She hung up. The next morning, I received an email from her attorney. It wasn't threatening, it was carefully worded. They wanted to revisit certain provisions of the settlement. I forwarded it to Daniel. He called me within an hour. Don't respond. I wasn't going to. Good. Can she undo the settlement? Not simply because she regrets it. That's what I thought. Mark. Yeah? Don't get emotionally involved. I laughed. I'm trying. Good. The funny thing was, by then, I wasn't emotionally involved. That was what Rachel didn't understand. She thought my calmness was strategy. It wasn't. I had simply stopped needing her to understand me. That was the real revenge. Not the house, not the money, not the assessment. Freedom. For 11 years, I had spent enormous amounts of energy trying to keep someone happy who had already decided that happiness meant having more. Now I had none of that responsibility. Rachel had the house. She had the car. She had the furniture. She had the life she said she wanted. And I had a 1-bedroom apartment, a cheap folding table, a growing savings account, and the first peaceful sleep I'd had in years. 6 months after the divorce, I got promoted again. My company offered me a regional position. The salary increase wasn't enormous, but the bonus structure was much better. I moved into a slightly larger apartment. I bought a real dining table. I replaced the mattress. I took a trip to Colorado with 2 friends. I started dating again. Not seriously, just coffee, dinner, walks, conversations. It felt strange to me women who weren't asking me to prove anything. One woman named Claire asked me why my marriage ended. I told her the truth. She cheated. Claire looked at me. I'm sorry. Thank you. Are you angry? I thought about it. Less than I expected. Why? I smiled. Because she got what she wanted. Claire laughed. That's a strange way to describe divorce. Maybe. What did she want? The house. And you let her have it? Yes. Claire studied me. Why? I looked out the restaurant window. I think she needed it more than I did. That was the cleanest explanation I could give. But I still wasn't telling anyone the whole truth, because I had learned something during the divorce. Sometimes the most satisfying revenge is not making someone lose. It's refusing to save them from the consequences of what they chose. Rachel's financial situation continued deteriorating. The HOA assessment became official. The final amount was higher than the early estimate, $36,400 per household. Payment options were available. Rachel chose the longest payment schedule. Then the basement developed a moisture issue after a heavy spring storm. The problem wasn't catastrophic, but repairs were expensive. The drainage restrictions complicated the work. She called me again. Did you know about this? About the basement? Yes. No. You're sure? Yes. No. You're sure? Yes. You knew about the drainage. I knew about the easement. You knew the basement could have problems. Every basement can have problems. She didn't answer. I could hear her breathing. Then she said something I never expected. I think you planned this. I sat silently. Mark? No. You expect me to believe that? Yes. You knew everything. Yes. You knew everything. I knew some things. You knew enough. I knew the house had risks, and you still gave it to me. You wanted it. She started crying. I didn't feel victorious. I felt sad, because suddenly I realized something. Rachel hadn't wanted the house because she loved it. She wanted it because she believed keeping it meant she had won. And now that the house was becoming difficult, she wasn't grieving the money. She was grieving the victory she thought it represented. I need help, she said. I closed my eyes. What kind? I don't know. Talk to your attorney. I don't want to talk to him. Why? Because he keeps telling me this is my responsibility. I looked down at my desk. He was right. I can't fix this for you, Rachel. I know. It was the first time she'd ever said those words to me. I can't fix this. Maybe that was the moment the divorce finally ended. Not legally, emotionally. I said, "You'll figure it out." She whispered, "How?" I almost told her. I almost explained that she had the ability to sell the house. She could downsize. She could restructure her finances. She could rent it. She had options. But I didn't give her a solution, because if I did, I'd be stepping back into the same role I'd spent years trying to escape. Instead, I said, "You have options. You just have to choose one." Then I ended the call. That night, I went for a run. It was raining. The streets were wet. Cars passed, people walked dogs, a couple stood under an awning outside a coffee shop. And for the first time, I realized something that had been true for months. I wasn't waiting for Rachel to lose anymore. I wasn't waiting for her to regret anything. I wasn't waiting for her to apologize. I had already won. Not because she was struggling, because I wasn't. She had the house. I had my life back. And the woman who once told everyone that I was too weak to fight had finally discovered the truth. I hadn't surrendered. I had simply stopped fighting for things I no longer wanted. But there was one final piece of the story. The thing I had seen in those property records years earlier. The thing that made the house even less valuable than she believed. And it was about to become impossible for her to ignore. Because the county had just approved a second phase of the infrastructure project. And unlike the first assessment, this one wasn't optional. The neighborhood would have to grant temporary construction access across several properties, including hers, and the plan showed something that Rachel had never noticed. The construction corridor ran directly along the rear portion of our old backyard, the same section where she had always dreamed of building a detached garage, the same section she had bragged about turning into a guest house someday, the same piece of land she had repeatedly described as one of the reasons she deserved the house. I knew what the construction would do. Not destroy the property, not ruin it, but make living there for several months extremely unpleasant. Noise, heavy equipment, temporary access, reduced privacy, and a property she had fought to own would suddenly become a place she couldn't easily sell without explaining what was happening. I knew all of that, but I hadn't caused any of it. I hadn't requested it. I hadn't remiculated it. I hadn't even spoken to the county. It was simply the consequence of a decision she had made. And when I received the official notice, I stared at the map for a long time. Then I folded it, put it in a drawer, and went back to making dinner. Because Rachel had finally gotten exactly what she wanted, the house, all of it, including everything that came with it. The county notice arrived on a Thursday, and I knew what it was before I opened it. I'd been expecting something like it for months, but seeing the official envelope sitting on my kitchen counter still made my stomach tighten. I tore it open and unfolded the notice. The stormwater infrastructure project affecting our subdivision had finally received its construction schedule. The work would begin in September. The access corridor would run along the rear boundaries of several properties, including the house Rachel had fought so hard to keep. The project was expected to last approximately 7 months. Heavy equipment, temporary access, excavation, landscaping disruption, noise. The notice explained everything in dry, bureaucratic language, the kind that made a major inconvenience sound like a minor administrative matter. I read it twice. Then I set it beside my coffee. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I didn't even feel particularly vindicated. The truth was, I had been waiting for this moment, but now that it had arrived, it felt strangely ordinary. A few months earlier, I might have imagined myself laughing. Instead, I just thought, here we go. The problem was that Rachel had built her entire idea of victory around that property. She had taken the house because she believed the house was the prize. She hadn't understood that the property came with obligations, restrictions, and circumstances that weren't visible in the photographs she posted online. And now, those invisible things were about to become visible. I folded the notice and put it in a drawer. I didn't call Rachel. I didn't text her. I didn't forward the notice. She would receive the same information directly from the county and the HOA. She was the owner. It was her responsibility. 2 days later, she called. I almost didn't answer. Hello? Mark. Her voice had changed. It wasn't angry at first. It sounded uncertain. What's up? Did you get the county notice? I looked at the drawer where I'd put mine. Yes. About the construction? Yes. About the construction? Yes. Are they allowed to do that? Apparently. Did you know this was coming? I knew the project was planned. There was silence. You knew? I knew there was a project under discussion. That's not what I asked. I didn't know the final schedule. You knew there would be construction behind my house. I knew there was a possibility. Mark, Rachel, you're doing it again. Doing what? Acting like you don't know what I'm talking about. I leaned back in my chair. I know exactly what you're talking about. Then tell me the truth. The truth is that the county approved an infrastructure project. I knew the project existed. I didn't know exactly when construction would begin. You should have told me. You had the same notice I did. That's not the point. Then what is the point? She went quiet. I could hear traffic through her open window. You knew enough to let me take the house. There it was again. The accusation underneath every conversation. You knew enough. She didn't care whether I had technically known the exact details. She cared that I had known there were risks. And she was right. I had. I knew there were risks, I said, and you still let me take it. You wanted it. You knew I didn't understand. I told you about the assessment. You didn't explain it. You had a lawyer. So did you. Exactly. She took a breath. I hate you. I closed my eyes. I'm sorry you feel that way. Don't do that. Do what? Talk to me like I'm a stranger. I almost said, "We are strangers," but I didn't. There was no point. "What do you want me to say?" I asked. "I want to know why you did this." "Did what?" "Gave me the house, gave me the desk, because you wanted it." "That's not an answer." "It is." "No, it isn't." She started crying. I could hear it. "You knew I'd struggle. I knew the house had expenses. You knew I couldn't afford them. I knew your finances were tight. Because you knew everything about our money." "Rachel, I didn't control your money. You controlled the household." "No, I managed the bills." "Same thing." "It's not." "Whatever." She hung up. I sat there staring at the phone. The old version of me would have called back. I would have explained. I would have tried to calm her down. I would have apologized for something just to make the conversation end. I didn't. That was one of the biggest changes in me. I had finally learned that someone being angry with me did not create an obligation for me to fix their feelings. The construction began in September. The first week was miserable for Rachel. I knew because a mutual friend mentioned it. Heavy equipment started arriving before sunrise. Temporary fencing went up. The rear portion of the neighborhood became a work zone. The project wasn't destructive in the dramatic sense. It wasn't going to tear down houses, but it was loud, intrusive, and inconvenient. Trucks came and went. Workers needed access. Landscaping had to be removed in places. The backyard that Rachel had photographed for social media was suddenly surrounded by orange fencing. She stopped posting pictures. Then she stopped posting altogether. I didn't look for her updates. I didn't ask friends. I tried to forget about it. That lasted about 2 weeks. Then Emily sent me a text. "You okay?" I replied, "Yeah." "Why?" She said, "Rachel is apparently telling people you set this whole thing up." I stared at the message. I wrote, "What?" Emily explained that Rachel believed I'd known about the project long before the divorce and had deliberately allowed her to take the house because I knew the property would become difficult. I called Emily. "That's ridiculous." "I know. I couldn't make the county do anything." "I know. I didn't even own the property anymore." "I know." "Then why is she saying this?" Emily sighed. "Because she needs someone to blame." I was quiet. "Are you enjoying this?" she asked. "No." "You sure?" "Yes." "No, you sure?" "Yes." "Because I would understand if you were." "I'm not. Even after everything." "Even after everything." She was quiet for a moment. "You know you're different." "How?" "You don't defend yourself anymore." I smiled. "I don't need to. That's growth. Or exhaustion." She laughed. "Maybe both." After that conversation, I made a decision. I wasn't going to discuss Rachel with mutual friends anymore. If someone asked, I would say, "I hope she's okay." That was all. I didn't want the story spreading. I didn't want people taking sides. I didn't want my life becoming a public trial. I'd already spent enough time in that world. Meanwhile, my own life continued improving. My regional position at work became permanent. My income increased. I started working with larger commercial accounts. I became the person younger employees came to when they had questions about contracts. I bought a better apartment. I replaced the folding table. I bought a real couch. It was ridiculous how proud I was of that couch. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't designer, but it was mine. Nobody could tell me it wasn't practical. Nobody could tell me it was too expensive. Nobody could tell me we should spend the money somewhere else. I chose it because I liked it. That small freedom meant more to me than I expected. I also started dating seriously. Claire and I became close. She knew about the divorce. She knew about the affair. She knew I had given Rachel the house. What she didn't know was how complicated the property situation had been. I didn't tell her because I didn't want our relationship to begin with a story about my ex-wife. One evening, Claire and I were having dinner when she asked me a question. "Do you ever regret the divorce?" I put my fork down. The divorce itself? Yes. No. Not even once. I regret that it happened the way it did. She nodded. That's different. Very. Do you regret giving her the house? I laughed. You're the third person to ask me that. What's the answer? No. Why? I thought about it. Because I would rather start over with nothing than stay attached to something that keeps me tied to the past. Claire smiled. That's probably the healthiest thing you've ever said. I've said healthier things. Name one. I eat vegetables. She laughed. It was easy with her. That was the thing I noticed most. There was no constant negotiation, no emotional minefield. We could disagree without turning disagreement into warfare. We could spend an evening doing nothing. I hadn't realized how rare peace was until I experienced it. Then, one morning, 6 months after the divorce, Daniel called. We need to talk. About Rachel. I sighed. What now? She's having trouble with the mortgage. I figured. Her refinance application was denied. Okay, she's asking whether you'd be willing to buy the house back. I laughed because I thought he was joking. He wasn't. Seriously? Seriously. Why would I do that? She believes you may be interested because you know the property. I'm not. I know. Tell her no. I will. Anything else? Yes. He paused. Her attorney is asking whether you had prior knowledge of the assessment. I sat up. Prior knowledge? They think you knew more than you disclosed. I disclosed everything required. I know. And I told her about the potential assessment. I know. Then what are they talking about? They're trying to determine whether there is any basis to challenge the settlement. I laughed bitterly. There isn't. Probably not. Daniel. Yes? Do you think they can do anything? Not based on what you've shown me. Good. But I want you to keep every document. I have everything. Good. After we hung up, I went to the storage cabinet in my apartment. I pulled out a plastic file box. Inside were copies of the property records, HOA correspondence, refinancing documents, engineering reports, and emails. I'd kept them because I was the kind of person who kept records. I found the email I'd sent Rachel about the potential assessment. It was short. HOA is still discussing potential drainage assessment. Nothing finalized yet. I'll keep you posted. Her response was one word. Okay, I stared at it. That one word had become the entire story. She had known there was a potential assessment. She just hadn't believed it mattered. I printed the email and gave it to Daniel. He called me later. This is exactly what we need. Good. Mark, you need to understand something. What? You didn't hide this. I know. No, I mean legally. You have a clear paper trail. Okay. If she tries to claim you concealed information, this is going to matter. Understood. And the settlement agreement was reviewed by both sides. I know. Then don't worry. I didn't. Not really. What worried me was the possibility that Rachel would keep trying to pull me back into her life through conflict. I didn't want that. I had worked too hard to get out. For the next few months, there were small disputes. Her attorney asked questions. Daniel answered them. Rachel requested documents. We provided what was appropriate. Nothing happened. Then, unexpectedly, Rachel called me herself. It was late on a Sunday evening. I almost let it go to voicemail. I answered. Hello? It's me. I know. Can we talk? About? The house. I looked at the clock. Okay. She sounded exhausted. I can't keep it. I didn't say anything. The mortgage is too much. The assessment is too much. The construction is making everything worse. I'm sorry. Don't say that. What should I say? I don't say that. What should I say? I don't know. I could hear her breathing. I thought I could handle it. I know. I thought keeping it would prove something. What? She was quiet. Then she said that I hadn't lost. I closed my eyes. Rachel, you didn't lose because you didn't keep the house. I know that now. Good. No, you don't understand. What? I thought if I had the house, everyone would think I'd won. I didn't answer. My friends congratulated me, she said. They said you were crazy. They said I got the better deal. She laughed bitterly. I believed them. I know. You know what the worst part is? What? You were never fighting me. I stayed silent. I kept trying to beat you. Her voice cracked. You had already left. That sentence hit harder than anything else she'd said because it was true. Emotionally, I had left long before the settlement. The paperwork was just the last step. I'm sorry, I said. Why? Because I didn't want things to end like this. But they did. Yes. She took a long breath. Did you know I wouldn't qualify for the refinance? I knew it might be difficult. That's not the same answer. No. Did you think I would fail? I hesitated. I thought you were taking on something you hadn't fully considered. That's basically the same thing. No, it isn't. Why didn't you fight for the house? Because I didn't want it. You keep saying that because it's true. But you could have kept it. Yes. You could have collected it. Yes. You could have sold it. Yes. You could have made money. Probably. So why? I looked around my apartment, at the books on the shelf, the framed photograph of my parents, the motorcycle helmet near the door, the life I'd built after leaving. Because I didn't want to spend another year fighting over a house. She was quiet. I thought you were weak. I know. I was wrong. I didn't answer. I was really wrong. I said you made the choice you thought was best. I didn't. At the time you did. She started crying. I hate that you're being reasonable. I smiled sadly. I'm not trying to punish you. Then why does this feel like punishment? I knew the answer. Because you're experiencing the consequences without me fixing them. Silence. That's what you always did, she whispered. Fixed things. Yes, I didn't realize how much you did. Neither did I. I thought you were controlling. Sometimes I was. You were trying to keep everything from falling apart. Yes. And I kept making it harder. I didn't respond. I'm sorry. I believed her. That was the strange thing. I believed her. But belief didn't mean reconciliation. Forgiveness didn't mean reopening the door. What are you going to do with the house? I asked. Sell it. Okay. I'm probably going to lose money. Maybe. You don't even sound happy. I'm not. Why? Because I don't want you to lose money. She laughed quietly. You really are different. Maybe. I wish I'd realized sooner. I didn't know what to say. So I said, take care of yourself. She said goodbye. The house went on the market a month later. The listing photographs looked beautiful. New paint, clean landscaping, professional staging. The listing price was high. Too high, in my opinion. I didn't comment. The property sat for weeks. Then months. Eventually, the price dropped. Then it dropped again. The construction project was still underway, and buyers were asking questions about the assessment and the infrastructure work. Rachel finally accepted an offer below what she had expected. I heard about it from Daniel because her attorney needed to confirm that there were no remaining claims between us. The closing happened without drama. She sold the house, paid the mortgage, settled the assessment, covered the selling expenses, and walked away with much less cash than she had imagined when she fought for the property. But she wasn't broke. She wasn't homeless. She wasn't destroyed. She simply didn't get the victory she had imagined. Around that time, something unexpected happened to me. My company offered me a partnership opportunity. It wasn't technically ownership of the entire business, but it gave me a stake in a regional operation and a significant increase in compensation. I accepted. I remember signing the paperwork and thinking about the day I'd signed the divorce settlement. Back then, I had signed away a house. Now I was signing into a future. The contrast wasn't lost on me. I told Claire that night. She hugged me. I'm proud of you. Thanks. Do you realize how far you've come? I looked at her. Sometimes. You were living in that tiny apartment when we met. I remember. And now you're doing this. Yeah. She smiled. Does it feel like revenge? I thought about the question. No. Good. Why good? Because if your success is revenge, then she's still part of it. That stopped me. Claire was right. I didn't want my future to be a response to Rachel. I wanted it to be mine. So I stopped comparing. I stopped thinking about what Rachel had. I stopped thinking about what I had. I started thinking about what I wanted. That changed everything. I began planning trips. I bought better equipment for my work. I invested in my retirement. I helped Emily with a business project. I spent more time with my parents. I even started volunteering with a local financial literacy program. I would sit with young adults and explain basic budgeting, credit, insurance, and long-term planning. It was strange to teach people about financial independence after spending so many years feeling financially trapped. One evening, a 22-year-old guy asked me, "What's the biggest money mistake people make?" I almost answered immediately. Then I thought about it. Confusing what you can afford with what you should own. He frowned. What does that mean? Just because a bank will approve something doesn't mean it belongs in your life. He nodded slowly. That's actually good. I smiled. It took me a long time to learn. I didn't tell him the story. I didn't need to. A few months later, I ran into one of Rachel's former friends at a restaurant. She approached me cautiously. Mark? I recognized her. Hey, can I ask you something? Sure. Did you know about the house? I smiled. What do you mean? The assessment, the construction, all of it. I knew there were risks. Rachel says you knew everything. I didn't. She thinks you deliberately gave her the house because you knew she'd lose money. I didn't know what she'd do. She looked at me. But you knew enough. Yes. Then why didn't you fight? I gave her the answer I'd given everyone. Because I didn't want it. She stared at me for a moment. That's it? That's it. She shook her head. I don't think I'll ever understand that. That's okay. She smiled faintly. You really mean that? Yes. She walked away. I finished dinner. I didn't think about the conversation again until months later. That's how I knew I was healed. Things that once would have occupied my entire mind barely stayed with me for an hour. Rachel had become a chapter instead of a central character. I could remember her without wanting anything from her. That was freedom. There was one final conversation. It happened nearly 3 years after the divorce. Rachel asked if we could meet. I agreed. We sat in a quiet coffee shop downtown. She looked older but healthier, calmer. She told me she'd moved into a townhouse. She had paid down a lot of her debt. She had changed jobs. She wasn't seeing anyone seriously. She said she had started therapy. I told her I was glad. Then she said, I owe you an apology. I looked at her. For what? Everything. She laughed softly. That's a long list. I smiled. It is. She looked down. I thought you were weak. I know. I thought you were losing because you weren't fighting. I know. I thought the house meant I won. I didn't say anything. I understand now. Understand what? She looked directly at me. You didn't give me the house because you were weak. You gave it to me because you were done. I nodded. Yes. You knew the house had problems. I knew it had risks. You knew I didn't understand them. I thought you should have looked more carefully. I should have. She took a breath. Do you hate me? No. Do you forgive me? I thought about it. Yes. Her eyes filled with tears. Thank you. But forgiveness doesn't mean I want to go back. I know. I don't. I know. She smiled sadly. You really moved on. Yes, I'm glad. Me too. She looked at me for a long moment. I thought I'd feel worse hearing that. Why? Because I used to think your happiness was something I could take away. I didn't answer. I was wrong. We sat there quietly. Then she said something that stayed with me. You didn't get revenge on me. I looked at her. No, you just stopped rescuing me. Yes. She nodded. That was enough. I didn't disagree. When we left the coffee shop, she hugged me. It was brief. There was no romance, no unfinished business, just two people saying goodbye to a version of their lives that had already ended. I walked to my car and sat behind the wheel. For a few minutes, I didn't start the engine. I thought about the house, the divorce, the settlement, the email, the assessment, the construction, the refinance, the sale, all of it. Then I realized something. I had spent a long time thinking the revenge was that Rachel suffered consequences I had anticipated. But that wasn't the real revenge. The real revenge was that I no longer needed her to suffer. I didn't need her to regret cheating. I didn't need her to admit I was right. I didn't need her friends to apologize. I didn't need her parents to understand. I didn't need anyone to say I had won. I had stopped keeping score. And once I stopped keeping score, the game disappeared. I drove home. Claire was waiting for me. She asked how the meeting went. Good, I said. That's all? That's all. She smiled. You okay? Yeah. Really? I looked around our home. The place wasn't enormous. It wasn't the house Rachel had taken. It wasn't even particularly impressive. But it was warm, comfortable. Ours. And I realized I had something I had never had in the old house. Peace that didn't depend on someone else staying happy. Yeah, I said. I'm good. That night, I went to bed without thinking about Rachel. The next morning, I woke up and went to work. Life continued. Bills, meetings, traffic, coffee, emails, deadlines, birthdays, holidays, ordinary things. And ordinary things became the greatest revenge of all, because for years, I had thought my life needed to become extraordinary to prove I had survived. It didn't. I just needed it to become mine. My wife took the house. She thought she had taken my security, my future, my stability. What she didn't understand was that she had taken the physical structure I had spent years maintaining while leaving me with the freedom to build something new. She thought she won because I didn't fight, but I had finally learned that not every battle deserves to be fought. Sometimes, the smartest move is to recognize when the thing you're fighting for has already become a burden. Sometimes letting go isn't surrender. Sometimes it's the first real decision you make for yourself. And sometimes revenge isn't destruction. It's walking away clean, rebuilding quietly, and becoming so comfortable with the life you built afterward that the person who once thought they defeated you eventually realizes they were never holding your future in the first place. By the time Rachel sold the house, I had stopped thinking about it as my old home. That surprised me because, for years, I had believed a house was supposed to hold memories. Ours certainly held plenty. The first Christmas tree we'd put in the living room, the night we celebrated my promotion, the terrible barbecue where I accidentally set the grill on fire, the argument about whether the basement needed a television, the Sunday mornings when Rachel would make pancakes and complain that I used too many dishes, the tiny marks on the kitchen wall from moving furniture, the dent in the hardwood floor where I'd dropped a toolbox. Ordinary things. That's what made the house difficult to forget, not because it had been perfect, but because it had contained an entire version of my life. After the divorce, I had assumed I'd eventually miss it. I didn't. I missed who I thought we were when we lived there. That was different. Rachel's sale of the house should have been the end of the story. In a practical sense, it was. She had sold it, paid off what needed to be paid, and moved somewhere smaller. I had no legal connection to the property anymore. My name wasn't on the mortgage. My name wasn't on the deed. I wasn't responsible for the HOA. I wasn't responsible for the assessment. I wasn't responsible for the construction. I wasn't responsible for anything. And that was exactly how I wanted it. But life has a strange habit of testing whether you've actually learned the lesson you think you've learned. 3 months after the sale, I received an email from Daniel. The subject line was simple: final matter. I almost ignored it. Then I opened it. Rachel's attorney had sent a letter claiming that certain information related to the property's future infrastructure work had not been adequately understood during the divorce settlement. I read the letter twice. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was familiar. The language was carefully constructed. There were references to material circumstances, disclosure, equitable considerations, and financial impact. It sounded serious enough to scare someone who didn't know how these things worked. Daniel's response was much shorter. Don't worry, we have the documentation. I called him. What does she want? She's asking whether you had information about the infrastructure project before the settlement. I did. How much information? Enough to know there was a potential assessment and that the county was considering improvements. Did you know the final construction schedule? No. Did you know the final assessment amount? No. Did you know exactly how the project would affect the property? No. Then we're fine. I leaned back in my chair. Why is she doing this? Daniel was quiet. Mark, I think she's looking for someone to explain why the outcome wasn't what she expected. She knows the outcome. Knowing and accepting are different things. That sentence stayed with me because Daniel was right. Rachel wasn't trying to reverse the divorce anymore. She was trying to reverse the meaning of it. She wanted the story to be different. She wanted there to be a villain who had tricked her. It was easier than admitting that she had made a series of choices based on assumptions she hadn't bothered to verify. I told Daniel to handle it. He did. The matter disappeared. No hearing, no dramatic courtroom scene, no judge pounding a gavel, no secret loophole, just paperwork, the kind of paperwork nobody makes movies about. And honestly, that was appropriate, because the real story had never been about a brilliant legal trick. It had been about consequences. Rachel had chosen the house. She had chosen the car. She had chosen the furniture. She had chosen the furniture. She had chosen the financial obligations, and I had chosen not to fight her. That was it. The strange part was that people around me still wanted a more dramatic explanation. My friend Jason once asked me over dinner, "So what exactly did you know?" I looked at him. "About what?" "The house. Enough to know it wasn't worth fighting over." He shook his head. "You keep saying that because that's what happened." "No, there's something you're not telling me." I laughed. "Jason, you're imagining some master plan. Wasn't there?" "No." "Come on. I didn't put a tracking device in the basement. I didn't secretly buy the property next door. I didn't know some developer was going to build a shopping mall behind it." He laughed. "So you really just knew the house was going to be expensive?" "I knew it carried obligations." "And you let her take it?" "Yes." "That's insane." "Maybe." He stared at me. "Would you do it again?" I thought about it. "Yes." He shook his head. "I don't understand you." Neither did she. That ended the conversation. What Jason didn't understand was that the decision had become much easier once I separated two different questions. Question 1, what was the house worth? Question 2, what was the house worth to me? Those were not the same thing. The market might say the house was worth $600,000. A real estate agent might say it was worth $650. An appraiser might give another number. But if keeping it meant staying financially tied to Rachel for years, negotiating repairs, paying taxes, dealing with the HOA, refinancing, and potentially living in the same emotional shadow forever, then its value to me was much lower. Rachel had looked at the house as an asset. I had started looking at it as a chain. Once I saw that, letting go became easy. My life after the divorce continued in a direction I couldn't have predicted. The partnership at work became more demanding. I traveled more, I hired an assistant, I started mentoring 2 younger employees. I got better at saying no. That last one mattered more than everything else. Before the divorce, I had thought being a good husband meant absorbing problems. If Rachel was upset, I tried to solve it. If she overspent, I adjusted the budget. If she wanted something, I tried to find a way. If she was angry, I apologized. If she was unhappy, I assumed I had failed. It took me years to understand how dangerous that mindset was. You can help someone without becoming responsible for their happiness. You can love someone without fixing every consequence of their choices. You can forgive someone without giving them access to you. Those lessons didn't come naturally. I had to learn them the hard way. Claire helped. We eventually moved in together, not because I needed someone. That was important to me. I wanted someone. There was a difference. She didn't ask me to become smaller so she could feel bigger. She didn't treat every disagreement like a threat. She didn't measure love in square footage. One Saturday morning, we were sitting at the kitchen table with coffee when she asked me something. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd fought for the house?" "Sometimes." "What do you think?" "I probably would have kept it." "Then what?" "I would have spent years paying for it." "Would you have been happier?" "No." "Would Rachel?" "No." "Then I guess you made the right choice." I smiled. "That's what I think." She took a sip of coffee. "Do you know what I find interesting?" "What?" She thought she was taking something from you. I looked at her. "Yeah, but you weren't attached to it anymore." "Not really." "That's why she couldn't beat you." I smiled. "Maybe." She shook her head. "No, not maybe." She just shook her head. "No, not maybe." I didn't argue, because she was right. Rachel had spent months trying to win a contest I had already quit. That was why my agreement confused everyone. My lawyer thought I was surrendering. My family thought I was being manipulated. My friends thought I was emotionally broken. Rachel thought I had lost. None of them understood that the most important decision had already happened before we sat in that conference room. I had decided that my future was more valuable than my past. Everything after that was paperwork. There was another thing I never told Rachel. The night before the final settlement, I drove past the house. I hadn't planned to. I was coming back from dinner with my parents. I took the long way home. The house was lit up. Rachel was inside. I could see the living room lights through the windows. For a few seconds, I sat in my car. I remembered the first time we'd seen that house. Rachel had grabbed my hand. "It's perfect," she'd said. I had laughed. "It's enormous." "It's not enormous. It has 4 bedrooms. So, we're 2 people." She had smiled. Not forever. Back then, I thought she meant children. Maybe she did. Maybe she meant something else. I sat there that night and realized the house wasn't perfect anymore. It was just a building. I drove away. That was the last time I ever looked at it as my home. Months later, after Rachel sold it, I drove past the neighborhood again. The construction fencing was gone. The new drainage infrastructure was mostly finished. The streets looked cleaner. The houses looked normal. A family was playing basketball in one driveway. A man was mowing his lawn. A woman was carrying groceries into a garage. I slowed down for a second. Then I kept driving. That was when I knew the story was really over. The house hadn't destroyed Rachel. It hadn't ruined me. It had simply become a very expensive lesson for both of us. The most important part of that lesson wasn't financial. It was emotional. Rachel had believed security came from owning the right things. I had believed security came from keeping everything together. We were both wrong. Security comes from knowing you can survive when things don't stay together. I learned that after losing almost everything. She learned it after getting almost everything she asked for. That difference mattered. A year after Rachel sold the house, I received a handwritten letter from her, not an email, not a text. A real letter. I recognized her handwriting immediately. I didn't open it right away. It sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days. Eventually, I opened it. She didn't ask for anything. That surprised me. She wrote about the divorce, about how angry she had been, about how convinced she'd been that she was entitled to the house. She admitted that she had told people I was weak. She admitted that she had described herself as the winner. She admitted that she had enjoyed watching me move into a smaller apartment. That part hurt to read, not because I cared about her opinion anymore, because I remembered how I had felt at the time. She wrote that she had confused possessions with proof. She thought the person who walked away with more furniture had won. She thought the person who kept the bigger house had won. She thought the person who looked better on social media had won. Then she wrote something that made me stop. I finally understand why you agreed so easily. I stared at that sentence. Then I kept reading. You weren't trying to beat me. You were trying to stop being married to me. I read it again. That was the closest thing to an apology I ever needed. Not because it erased anything. It didn't, but because she finally understood the central truth. The divorce wasn't a game. There wasn't a scoreboard. There wasn't a winner. There were two people who had built something that no longer worked and then spent months trying to decide who deserved which pieces of it. I wrote her back. One paragraph. I appreciate you understanding. I hope you're doing well. I genuinely wish you peace. That was all. I didn't mention the house. I didn't mention the assessment. I didn't mention the assessment. I didn't mention the construction. I didn't mention the refinance. I didn't say I told you so. There was nothing left to prove. A few weeks later, Rachel called. Did you get my letter? Yes. Did you mean what you wrote? Yes. Did you mean what you wrote? Yes. She breathed out. Thank you. You're welcome. There was silence. Then she asked, Are you happy? I looked across the room at Claire. She was sitting on the couch reading. Yes, good. What about you? I'm getting there. I hope you do. Me too. She paused. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't cheated? I didn't answer immediately. I don't think about alternate lives anymore. Why? Because there's no way to know which version would have been better. Maybe we could have fixed it. Maybe we would have been happy. Maybe, but you don't want to know. No. Why? Because I like the life I have. She was quiet. That's a good answer. Thanks. Goodbye, Mark. Goodbye, Rachel. That was our last conversation, at least so far. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe she'll get married again. Maybe I'll get married again. Maybe we'll never speak. That's okay. I don't need a perfect ending. I need a peaceful one. And that brings me to the part of this story that people always misunderstand when I tell it. They think the revenge was the house. It wasn't. They think I knew some secret legal loophole. I didn't. They think I intentionally set Rachel up to fail. I didn't. They think I somehow manipulated the county, the HOA, the mortgage company, or the real estate market. I didn't. I didn't make any of those things happen. I knew about risks that were already there. I knew about obligations she could have researched herself. I knew the house wasn't free, and when she demanded it, I didn't rescue her from her decision. That's all. The consequences belong to the choice. The same way my consequences belong to mine. I lost a marriage, I lost a house, I lost money, I lost friends, I lost the future I thought I was going to have. But I also lost something else. I lost the need to be understood by someone who had already decided not to understand me. That was worth more than the house. I think that's why people misunderstand quiet revenge. They imagine revenge has to involve humiliation. They imagine a dramatic reveal. They imagine the protagonist standing in a courtroom while everyone realizes he was secretly 10 steps ahead. Real life usually isn't like that. Sometimes revenge is boring. Sometimes it's paying your bills on time. Sometimes it's getting promoted. Sometimes it's going to therapy. Sometimes it's sleeping 8 hours. Sometimes it's refusing to answer a manipulative text. Sometimes it's learning how to cook for one. Sometimes it's sitting across from someone who hurt you and realizing you don't need them to admit they hurt you. And sometimes it's saying yes when everyone expects you to say no because you know exactly what you're willing to walk away from. That was what happened to me. My wife asked for the house. I said yes. She asked for the car. I said yes. She asked for almost everything that made her old life comfortable. I said yes, and everyone assumed those yeses meant I had lost. They didn't. They meant I had finally understood what winning actually meant. Years later, I still have the same basic rule. Never fight for an asset just because losing it would make someone else think they beat you. That's how people stay trapped. That's how people spend years paying for decisions made during emotional moments. That's how pride becomes debt. I almost made that mistake. I almost fought for the house because I couldn't stand the idea of Rachel having it. Then I realized something. If I kept the house just to stop her from having it, she would still control me. She would still determine my decisions. She would still occupy my thoughts. She would still be part of my future. I didn't want that, so I gave her what she wanted. And eventually, she discovered that getting what you want isn't always the same as getting what you need. The house had been her victory, until it wasn't. The car had been her prize, until the payments became a burden. The furniture had been proof that she had walked away with more, until none of it mattered. And me? I started with a one-bedroom apartment and a folding table. I thought I had lost everything, but I was wrong. I had lost everything that required me to keep being the person I had been. That was the best thing that ever happened to me. I became financially independent. I became emotionally independent. I became better at my job. I became closer to my family. I built new friendships. I found someone who loved me without keeping score. I learned to enjoy ordinary days. And most importantly, I stopped measuring my life against Rachel's. That was the final victory. Not when she struggled. Not when she sold the house. Not when she admitted she had been wrong. Not when she apologized. The victory happened the morning I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about her in 3 weeks. Then 3 months. Then 6. Eventually, I couldn't remember the last time I'd wondered whether she regretted what she'd done. That was when I knew I was free. People sometimes ask me whether I would handle the divorce differently if I could go back. I think about it. I'd protect myself better financially. I'd document more. I'd communicate more clearly. I'd probably get therapy sooner. I'd probably stop trying to save the marriage months before I did. But would I fight for the house? No, absolutely not. I'd make the same decision. I'd let her take it. I'd let her believe she won. I'd walk away. I'd start over. Because the thing I didn't understand at 36 was that starting over isn't losing. Sometimes starting over is the first time you're finally building a life that belongs entirely to you. And if you're wondering what happened to the house after Rachel sold it, I eventually looked it up out of curiosity. The family who bought it finished the backyard. They planted trees. They built a small patio after getting the proper approvals. They had 2 kids. I saw a photograph online once. The house looked happy. That made me smile, because the house wasn't evil. It wasn't cursed. It wasn't a trap. It was just a house. Rachel had assigned it a meaning it never had. I had done the same. We both thought it represented something bigger. For her, it represented winning. For me, it represented the life I had failed to save. Eventually, both meanings disappeared, and the house became what it had always been. Brick, wood, concrete, windows, a roof, nothing more. I don't hate Rachel, I don't love her, I don't want her back, I don't want revenge anymore. And that's the part she probably never expected. When she took the house, she thought she was taking the last thing I had. She was wrong. The last thing I had was myself. And she couldn't take that. Not then, not now, not ever. So if you ask me why I agreed so easily, that's the answer. I didn't agree because I was weak. I didn't agree because I was defeated. I didn't agree because my lawyer failed me. I didn't agree because I didn't understand money. I didn't agree because I didn't know what the house was worth. I agreed because I understood exactly what it would cost me to keep fighting. And I finally decided that my peace was worth more. That was the revenge. Not watching her lose, watching myself stop caring whether she won. And honestly, I wouldn't trade that for the house. Not for anything.